If you thought clowns are creepy, well, you haven't heard of old-timey circuses. Back in the day, circuses were a bit different than what we know today. Sure, they still had clowns and whatnot, but they also put up shows that are really weird and often inhumane by modern standards. So, join us as we explore the 15 most bizarre circus freaks that actually lived and performed. Number 15. Prince Randian. Prince Randian was born in Guyana, South America, but his birth name was never disclosed. He had tetra amelia syndrome, meaning he was born without arms or legs. At 18, he moved to the US and began performing under P.T. Barnum. His specialty was rolling and lighting cigarettes with his lips. He could also write using only his mouth. Occasionally, show promoters dressed him as a snake, caterpillar, or even a potato. In 1932, he featured in the cult film Freaks, performing his famous cigarette trick. Despite his condition, Randian had a sharp sense of humor, which reportedly made him quite popular with women. He married and fathered 5 children. He remained in performance until the end. At 63, after giving one final show in New York City, he died of a heart attack. To this day, he remains one of the most memorable figures in circus history, not because of what he lacked, but what he managed to accomplish in spite of it. Number 14. Emmett Bijano. Emmett, aka alligator-skinned man, was born in Florida with ichthyosis, a rare condition that left his body covered in thick, scaly skin. Only his face and hands remained smooth, giving him a hauntingly distinct appearance. Emmett eventually entered the sideshow circuit, where he met Priscilla, the monkey girl, who was performing with the Lothar organization. Their bond formed quickly, and they married in 1938. Together, they created a shared life on stage and off. They had a daughter who sadly died from pneumonia shortly after birth. Later, they adopted a son named Tony and continued performing under the billing "The World's Strangest Married Couple." The two toured widely, managed their own show, and became beloved figures in circus lore. Their marriage spanned an impressive 57 years until Emmett's passing on May 14, 1995. Priscilla followed on February 5, 2001. Emmett had been adopted by Johnny Bijano after losing his biological father. Together, he and Priscilla embodied resilience through spectacle. Number 13. Darwin Sit's Missing Link. According to sensational posters, Creo was presented as Darwin's missing link, the alleged bridge between ape and human. She was described as having food pouch cheeks, a soft tail, full lips, and a body covered entirely in hair. At just 7, she debuted at London's Westminster Aquarium in 1883. Before dying in 1926, she toured with Barnum and Bailey and the Ringling Brothers. The aquarium, notorious for mixing sideshow acts and scandal, marketed her as both exotic and erotic. Scientific claims surrounding her were completely fabricated, yet they fascinated audiences. In 1883, she was displayed at Trinity College, Dublin, where doctors were asked to confirm she came from a family with similar features. But Creo was far from a primitive figure. By her teenage years, she was highly educated, fluent in 5 languages, literate and trained in piano. Though packaged as a half-simian wonder, she was a fully intelligent, cultured woman. Number 12. Josephine Clofullia. Josephine was born in Switzerland in 1827 and developed hypertrichosis, a condition that caused excess hair growth. By 8, she already had a 2-inch beard. Barnum hired her but changed her surname to Clofullia, aiming to stir debate: was she really a bearded woman or a man in disguise? Much to his dismay, most visitors accepted her as a woman without much controversy. So in 1853, Barnum staged a scandal. He hired a man named William Charr to sue him for fraud. The case went to court, where Josephine's father, husband, and 3 medical professionals testified that she was biologically female. The stunt paid off. Newspapers ran wild with the story, and public curiosity exploded. Crowds flocked to Barnum's American Museum just to see her in person. It's a classic example of Barnum's genius, using spectacle not only to entertain but also to manipulate the press and turn even a lawsuit into profitable publicity. Number 11. Mechanical Men. One quick way to make money in a freak show was by hiring someone to pose as a robot or mechanical human. One act in the early 1900s was called No Name. Mr. No Name was described as a humanoid object whose arms, head, and posture simulated the movements of a well-dressed gentleman. Electric wires were connected to him, and a woman, likely the one operating the machinery, joined him on stage. He would walk and move stiffly, never breaking his expressionless face. The show's manager even offered $100 to any woman who could make the mechanical man smile. In a publicity stunt, Mr. No Name was taken to Washington, D.C., where he appeared on the steps of the Treasury building during a war-saving stamp campaign. There it, as newspapers referred to him, tumbled dramatically down the steps, completely unharmed. Spectators were stunned. If he were a man, it was a miracle. If he was a machine, it was genius. Number 10. The Wild Men of Borneo. Barnum's fascination with dwarf performers continued, but with a gimmick. He hired brothers Hiram and Barney Davis, who were mentally disabled and weighed just 45 pounds each. Yet, astonishingly, they could each lift up to 300 pounds. Their crowd puller, hoisting members of the audience. Barnum rebranded them as Wayno and Plutonor, branding them the Wild Men of Borneo. He fabricated a backstory claiming they were captured from the jungles of Borneo, where allegedly all people looked and acted like them. The public eagerly bought into the fantasy. At Barnum's New American Museum in New York, their act earned over $200,000, a staggering sum back in the 1800s, equivalent to millions today. As they aged, both brothers began losing their eyesight. Fortunately, they were well cared for into their 90s. Still, even upon their deaths, the deception lived on. When Plutonor died, newspapers reported it as though he truly had been a wild man from Borneo, never revealing their actual real identities. Number 9. The Spotted Negro Boy. George Alexander Grattan was born in 1808 on the Caribbean island of St. Vincent. His parents were African slaves working on a plantation owned by Mr. Alexander, who was stunned by the boy's appearance. George had piebaldism, a rare genetic condition that causes patches of light skin, especially on the face and upper body. Seeing an opportunity, Alexander gave the boy to Grattan, the plantation overseer, who passed on his name. George was shown off as a baby across the island, with spectators paying $1 to view him. At just 15 months old, he was shipped to England and sold to a man named Richardson for 1,000 guineas, roughly $132,000 today. He became known as the beautiful Spotted Negro Boy, adored for his unique appearance and cheerful personality. Baptized in 1810, George performed up to 12 hours per day, an exhausting schedule. Sadly, it took its toll. He died young, just 4 years old, and was buried in Buckinghamshire by Richardson in a private vault. What do you think about him? Well, let us know. Number 8. Hop the Frog Boy. Samuel Parks was born in 1874 with osteogenesis imperfecta, a genetic disorder infamous for causing very brittle bones. While some live with mild cases, severe forms involve hundreds of fractures, scoliosis, dental fragility, short stature, and even muscle and skin weakness. For Parks, this meant endless breaks and severely distorted limbs. He debuted publicly at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair as a medical exhibit. Realizing he could help support his impoverished family, he committed to sideshows full-time. He leaned into his condition, crawling on all fours and performing as a frog. Audiences were told he had the limbs of a bullfrog and the face of a man. Parks married twice, though loss followed him. His first wife died during childbirth, along with their second child. Their firstborn son survived and was healthy. Later, Parks remarried a fellow performer known as the Connecticut Midget, and together they briefly toured as the world's strangest couple. Through tragedy, Parks turned survival into performance. Number 7. Pansy Chinery. In the early 1900s, aerial acts thrilled audiences, but few performers matched the boldness of Pansy Chinery, also known by her stage name Ada Ayana. Pansy was an aerialist who performed high above the crowd, suspended solely by her teeth. Clamped onto a leather strap or steel ring, she twirled and swung in mid-air without a safety net and without trained assistance. Her act blended fear and fascination. Audiences gasped as she spun above them, some unable to watch while others couldn't look away. Her entire career rested on nerve and sheer audacity. Little is known about her personal life, but during the World War I-era circuses, she was a headliner. Her act challenged every notion of what a woman should do in entertainment. She defied expectations and gravity, literally. At a time when most women were told to stay grounded, Pansy soared, setting a precedent for strength, elegance, and risk. Her routine remains one of the boldest aerial feats ever attempted, and please do not try any stunts at home. Number 6. The Circassian Lady. Zaluma Agra was the first of many women to be marketed as a Circassian lady. Not much is known about her personally, but unlike many sideshow acts with physical anomalies, she was almost certainly just an actress playing a part. What's indisputable is that she was entirely a creation of P.T. Barnum. In the late 1800s, the Western ideal of feminine beauty was the Circassian woman, seen as a symbol of racial purity. The myth started in the 1700s with exotic tales of light-skinned women sold into Turkish harems. In 1864, Barnum requested that someone find him one. When no real Circassian woman could be secured, he simply made one up. Agra, the star of the East, wore elegant gowns, sparkling jewelry, and washed her hair in beer, combing it into a frizzy halo. That eccentric hairstyle became iconic. Sideshows nationwide copied the look, despite it having zero connection to actual women from the Caucasus. It was all myth. Number 5. The Human Skeleton. Isaac W. Sprague was born in East Bridgewater, Massachusetts, and grew up like any ordinary boy. He loved swimming and was perfectly healthy until age 12, when he began losing weight rapidly despite maintaining a strong appetite. Doctors were baffled, but he was eventually diagnosed with progressive muscular atrophy. After his parents died, Isaac could no longer manage his father's cobbling trade due to his frailty. Needing work, he joined Barnum's American Museum as the Human Skeleton, earning $80 per week, roughly $2,000 by today's standards. All he had to do was stand on display. He always carried a milk can to help keep his strength up. He remained with the show for years, met his wife, and even fathered children. By 44, Isaac weighed just 43 pounds. He passed away at 46, outliving what most expected from someone with his illness. Despite his condition, he carved out a life, a career, and a family, becoming one of Barnum's most memorable performers. He was not a freak, but a real legend. Number 4. Teodulo A. Valenzuela. Weighing 645 pounds, Teodulo A. Valenzuela once held the title of the world's heaviest man. But behind the headline was a man navigating a life shaped by pain, attention, and resilience. Teo became a fixture at carnivals and county fairs, drawing crowds who came to stare. At a time when obesity was mocked far more than understood, he stood proudly under the spotlight. Daily life wasn't easy. Every movement, walking, dressing, breathing, required effort few could fathom. Yet on stage, Teo flipped the narrative. He used humor as armor, ensuring audiences laughed with him rather than at him. That shift in power made him unforgettable. While little is known about his private life, his public persona was unmistakable. Teo wasn't simply a spectacle, he was someone who leaned into his uniqueness and turned it into strength. He stood on stage not just as the heaviest man, but as someone who rewrote his story on his own terms. Number 3. The Tocci brothers. Giacomo and Giovanni Tocci were born in 1877 in Italy and are listed in Guinness World Records as the longest living conjoined twins, reaching 63. Fused at the sixth rib, they shared a single pair of legs, each controlling one. Internally, though, they had separate organs, distinct hearts, stomachs, lungs, and circulatory systems. One could fall ill while the other remained fine. Their personalities diverged too. Giovanni enjoyed beer, while Giacomo preferred water. Giovanni sketched well, while Giacomo talked more. At first, their parents were devastated, but soon realized their son's uniqueness had financial potential. They toured Europe, then America, billed as the two-headed boy and the wonderful blended twins. Although unable to stand unaided, they were clever, musically talented, and spoke multiple languages. Giovanni was considered the sharper of the two. They typically got along, though occasional spats happened. By 1891, they were earning $1,000 a week, about $25,000 today. Scientific American even described them as marvels of nature and science. And let's be honest, we mean why not? Number 2, Pauline Musters. Pauline Musters gained international recognition as the shortest woman ever officially recorded, standing at just 58 centimeters tall. From an early age, she was introduced to the stage and quickly became a standout in traveling circuses and variety shows throughout Europe and America. Despite her small stature, Pauline radiated charisma. Her charm, poise, and innate stage presence captivated audiences far beyond curiosity. She could sing, dance, and command a crowd, not as a sideshow novelty, but as a genuine performer. Her elaborate costumes were tailored precisely to her size, enhancing her visual appeal on stage. Audiences adored her, but her career was tragically brief. In 1895, at only 19 years old, Pauline died from pneumonia and meningitis. Her life, though short, left an outsized mark on circus history. She wasn't remembered merely for her height, but for her ability to own the stage. Pauline Musters proved that talent and presence don't depend on size, only spirit and presence. Let's end this with number 1, the Chinese giant. Chang Yu-sing stood over 8 feet tall and weighed 364 pounds. Barnum loved dressing him in long, flowing Chinese robes. He claimed it made Chang appear even taller. For promotional flair, Barnum falsely advertised him as being 9 feet tall. When Chang joined the freak show, he leaned into what made him unique, mocking the stereotype that all Chinese people were short. His towering height instantly drew attention. After all, a Chinese giant went entirely against the racial expectations of that era, making him an instant curiosity. However, historical records on Chang's involvement with the show are sparse, suggesting his participation was likely limited to a short-term contract. It's probable that after collecting his earnings, he quietly exited the stage and resumed his personal life. Despite his brief tenure, Chang's act remains part of the lore surrounding Barnum's freak show, where illusion, exaggeration, and spectacle often mattered far more than truth. Well, that's it for today. We hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for hanging with us, and we'll see you very soon.